Oh, hello. Hi, I can call you Amma, right?
Yeah, you can call me Amma. Yeah,
Okay, that's
it's
good. How
very
are
nice.
you doing? Well, thank you for
Yeah,
being here today.
thank you. Really lovely to meet you again, Monica. It's lovely to be here. Lovely to be at a
Oh,
root of a tree.
I know, right? There you go. This is a good space to be. And actually, yeah, this is welcome everybody. One more session of Grandma's March. We started on March 10th this year, and we're going until the 20th of March. So it is a pleasure to have Amat this year. And actually, yeah, it's been the fourth edition, and we have been interviewing a lot of women during this 40 years, because actually the project started as an inspiration from my grandmothers, and I started interviewing women and the connection to their grandmothers. But I realized, no, this is not only women that have this connection, or that all also bring ancestral practices into their work, or that have this connection to ancestral feminine wisdom. So yeah, I've been interviewing more men this year. I think we're gonna have like four men as a total. And when I recently, I met Ama. I don't even remember how. Something caught my attention in LinkedIn. We got connected. I don't know how. Things happen for a reason.
Yeah,
And right. And then we had a call, and that's how we're here. And I don't know, this call was good. I started talking about my project, and I ended up inviting him to be here and share his amazing story with us. So that's why is here. But before we start, I want to make a brief introduction of you, and then we can start playing and talking and
lovely. Thank you.
and going from there. Um, so Ama, he is an accredited coaching supervisor and senior practitioner of the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, who brings a unique blend of business and spirituality to his clients. And that's very interesting combination. With a background in technical support management and a degree in AI, well, that's amazing. He has a wealth of experience in diverse industries, from education and IT tech companies to the health industry. As a leadership consultant and mindfulness based executive, Amaranatho utilizes his playful monk method to help executives, agile leaders, and teams stay calm and connected during complex situations. Drawing on his experience as a former Buddhist monk, and I want to know more about that story. How did you get into all that? And a world explorer, which I love that. I love traveling. He brings a deep understanding of solitude and uncertainty to his coaching practice, helping his clients realize inner peace and clarity. Amma has worked with an array of clients, including founders of large startups, HR executives, and cybersecurity teams, helping them improve self reflection skills, ethical awareness, the ability to manage personal or group tensions. And his core focus is on collective leadership, helping executive teams work together effectively and harmoniously. And I know how much that's needed because I'm in HR and corporate, and definitely all this work that you're doing is really needed. Leadership right now needs this. So I'm glad that we have somebody out there working with this. Currently, he is serving as a part-time head of faculty and leadership for Blend Associates, which supports National Health Service executive leaders and teams in navigating complex, chaotic, and stressful environments. And with all this diverse background and unique approach, he's dedicated to helping his clients achieve a full potential and lead with confidence, and also stay with compassion, and stay very connected to their spirituality. So yeah, that's you.
Is
I'm
that
just,
me?
and that's probably a short version of you, right?
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
I love it. So yeah, really like the theme of this year. It says it is time to revive our roots and ask ourselves, what did we do once we knew? So touching into that, I would love to go back and explore a little bit of your roots and tell us a little bit of your story. Where do you come from? what's your land, the connection to your ancestors or your grandmothers, how that started, and then we move on how you became a monk and all that fun stuff that we all want to know.
Great. Well, when I think, there's two things that come to mind straight away. One is the way that we connected, and in some ways that's ancestral, beyond time and place. Like, how can we, like, we don't know each other. We met through LinkedIn, but this for me is that ancestral power. And there's and this image of the root of the tree, our connection to the planet and Earth and our environment. So when I think about my grandmother, on my mother's side, I think about compassion. It's the first word that comes to mind. Her unconditional love, her ability to hear me in all sorts of different situations, from a very young age, where she looked after me for quite a long time, till when I was a teenager, and then as a young adult. And then in contrast, on my father's side, my grandmother, she died when I was a teenager, and I remember going into her house and feeling the coldness, completely the lack of emotions. Wow. Sometimes also when we think about grandmothers, it's not all black, it's not all fantastic, and so I bring both those parts. That cold lack of emotion and this beautiful open-hearted compassion. And I'm not comparing, I'm just saying that is how the world is, so when I think of my grandmother, I went on to become a Buddhist monk, and we can say a little bit about that later on. But the thing that I remember very clearly was that I was running a creative retreat, and it was in the winter time. It was in November in England. I lived as a monk in England, and I had this sort of funny feeling during the retreat. I couldn't place it, but it was like I got to the end of the retreat, and I switched on my phone, and there was a message, and the message was, "You need to get to the hospital now. Your grandmother's not well." And literally there was a person standing by the side of me and said, "I'm taking you there right now." So literally I got the call, I got in the car, and we were there, and I was very lucky. I was only an hour away from the hospital. I got straight to the hospital, and my family were there, and my gran was not in good shape. And she looked at me so beautifully. She said, "What are you doing here? You're so busy. You're so busy." And she was just full of this, like, just love. And I looked at her, and then we had to go outside, and we spoke to the doctor, and they said, "It's not looking good. We need to give her a small hospital measure, and we'll see how it goes." And it didn't go well. And we came back, and they said, you have to be prepared for her death now. So but this was all my training as a monk. So I just sat there, and my other family members around, and just had a hand, and just talked to her. Said, "It's it's just safe to go now." Like, her compassion, in return. And then I just turned around to her, said, "It's safe to go now. It's all right. I'll just breathe with you. I'll breathe with you all the." So she just breathed in and breathed out, breathe in and breathe out, and then she just breathed out, just like that, breath out, and then it was finished. And it was so beautiful. It's not to say I didn't have grief. Of course, I have grief and emotions with it, but it epitomizes that compassion, the compassion that we can experience from grandmothers, from the feminine aspect of ourselves. Whether we're male or female, it can be engendered, within our bodies in very different ways. I will never know what it's like to be a woman. I don't have a woman's body. It's just, that's how it is. I can understand the feminine aspect in myself. I've worked with it long enough to have a deep appreciation of what that means. But if you don't have examples of that in your life, it's also difficult. And my gran on that side was a great role model in that way. And my other grandmother was a role model in the sense of what not to do with your life.
Got it. Yeah,
Yeah,
which is
no,
important
it's
too.
important.
Yeah.
I felt I wasn't sort of welcome in that house. I don't think that was her intention at all, right?
Right.
But
I imagine.
not one bit. But it was just to see the clearly, and that's, you know, those forces, they shape your adulthood, your childhood, and, you know, into an adult. So I feel, you know, right now how grateful I was for that experience, and that experience has had so much impact on our family as well. You know, all sorts of different things went on, but through that engagement, you know, it opens up all sorts of different other possibilities, different parts of the family. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey. You know, through her death and moving on, also we found another part of a family, a huge part of our family. Yeah, also through the ancestors. Like, we went to a funeral, and then we said about, you know, so where does my gran come from? And then somebody says, oh, you haven't seen the ancestral chart.
Uh-huh.
No. And there was a huge family.
Oh,
And then
wow.
we found an uncle that was still alive. I mean, he was 102.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
incredible.
Incredible.
Incredible. Yeah, that's the movement in the ancestral field.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one
Yeah.
thing completes, yeah, and another thing is allowed to express and open itself. And can you allow yourself to receive that possibility? That was all the time as I was a monk, actually, that happened. Yeah, quite an amazing story, and enabled our family to also move on and deepen. Yeah,
Right,
very beautiful.
right. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. And I'm just curious as a boy, because I'm really curious that we are, like, I'm interviewing you as a man, that usually
Yes.
I interview women,
Yes.
and you're bringing that, like, okay, we all have the feminine and the masculine energies in
Yes.
ourselves, and the principles in ourselves. And growing as a boy, because I can see that men, and we were talking about this before, men in these times are very lost. I feel like they're very disconnected from something, because they just don't know any better. They grew up in a way society was expecting something from men, so it's difficult for men to connect that feminine energy. First, they don't have the body, like you said, but also probably growing up, yes or not, they had some role models or grandmothers. But how was for you as a boy also growing up? Like, what memories do you have of that connection? Like, any specific, like your grandma's house as a boy, or yeah?
I'm going to say something quite
Yes,
different,
please.
which is that actually, as a young person, I really struggled, right? And now,
Wow.
in retrospect, you see, so I would like
Got
to say
it.
this in retrospect. In
Yeah.
retrospect, I was struggling with understanding my emotions, right? And
Wow.
understanding that actually I was a very sensitive young boy, and
Got
I
it.
had no access to the technology,
Hmm.
right? So I just suffered. You know, I was you know, I mean, I had a pretty nice childhood in some ways, but on a lot of levels I really suffered. I couldn't understand my own feelings, you know, and I couldn't place them, and I couldn't even label
Oh,
them. Now I have a language.
got it.
Yeah, you know,
Got
and
it.
I'm very capable of saying, you know, I'm feeling off or sad or happy or angry or
Yeah.
whatever it is. But at that point, I had nothing, and so I was in some ways, very introverted. You know, I've got you can probably work out, I've got quite an extroverted personality. But as a kid, I was very introverted, and the men that I work with now, I recognise this sensitivity. Yeah, and how it was just like
Uh-huh.
just
Yes.
shut off,
Yeah, you're a boy. You're not supposed to show your feelings or emotions or anything,
no.
right?
And you know, and my dad said, you know, like I got bullied a bit at school because I'm quite big. You know, I was already maybe nearly 6 foot at 12, so I was.
Yeah.
And he said go and do boxing. So I went and did boxing, and I learned how to sort of defend myself. But
Got it.
nobody taught me to emotionally box.
I
Nobody taught me
get it.
to dance
That's so
with my emotions. So, like, nobody told me about the words. You know, I spent ages, I mean, a long time learning emotional words. You know, like I
Wow.
learned this thing, nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg, you know, and he has the feeling words and the needs words, you know, and I actually just had to learn them linguistically, you know, and there's something very interesting. I'm not sure in England, you know, the police wear helmets like this. Yeah,
Yes,
and
it's true.
it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
the reason
Yeah.
for
What's the
that,
reason?
the
Yeah.
reason for that is if I just take my glasses off 1 minute, yeah, and I go, hello, wow, or I'm unhappy, you see the eyebrows moving. Yeah, the police's helmet covers the eyebrows so that they don't show the emotions.
The expressions, so there you go.
Expressions is gone. So, like, imagine you're in a culture like that, yeah, and all the and you're, you know, there's no allowance, particularly with men, around emotions. You know, so what can you do with anger? You know, anger is like seen as a bad thing in men, right?
Yeah.
You know, well, I don't see it in that way. I see violence definitely, but not anger. Anger is an emotion, you know, or happiness, any of these things. So, you know, this sense of what we would now call embodiment, you know, and so now, you know, I was very fortunate because when I did become a monk, I started running these family camps, and so I worked with a lot of young men, you know, and the parents used to ask me what to do, and I would always say, go and get them into some sort of martial art. Right, something that brings them into the body, has discipline, because then you can start to work with the emotions. Yeah, they don't have to be locked up, they can come out, you know, you can meet the world. You know, and so the as I understand it, and the way that I work with my body is that the male energy is very much to do with muscles, right? I mean, even on a physical level. So as you release, you move your muscles, you move your emotions, right? And so you can then process them. So if you move physically, you can start to release them. And you know, and I knew none of this as a, you know, I knew none of this as a kid. So you know, and I was asked to be an adult very early on in my childhood. Like I was part of a family business, yeah, which required me to be around a high degree of well, I wouldn't say violence, but very tense places where I ought not to have been really as a young person. You know, I ought to have been playing, you know, like there's you know, there's this research by Stuart, I think his name is Stuart Kaufman, around play, who did all the research that said play happen. The people that murdered other people lacked play in their childhood. That's the research. Not anything else. The number one factor was play, right?
Wow.
So when you don't have free play in your childhood, yeah, you can't. It's very not can't. That's a strong word. It's difficult to work with your emotions because you've not actually practiced them.
Right.
That's where you learn. In the kindergarten, you push each other, and Bob says this, and Sheila says
it's
that.
true.
You know,
because when you play, you're experimenting with yourself.
Exactly.
You don't, right?
Yeah, and the other person doesn't really care because they haven't got the cognitive faculties to say anything. So they just, oh well, it's all right, it's all over. But as an adult, you remember. You know, you say, oh gosh, I don't like them, or you know, and you get into that. But as a kid, you don't. So that is another way of being with your emotions. So for me, all I had was my fists. I learned boxing, so then you know that's what I had. It was a very blunt tool.
Yeah.
You know, blunt tool. So yeah, so my tonality of my childhood overall was really like this, not understanding my emotions, not being sensitive, and then also being around like my grandmother and, you know, the sense of compassion. So that's really confusing. Like where am I in that? I'm feeling this, and then I'm, you know, so at some point you just say and shut it all down.
Got it.
Because it's too much. It's just too much for a little one to do, you know, it was too much for my little one to deal with, you know, and then you go on this journey of recovering. Yeah.
And this construction of everything, right? That's what we end up doing in our lives.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is there's an ancestral line to all of that as well. Yeah, that I couldn't ignore and unfolds anyway regardless if you think it doesn't or not, because it's a tonality, whether it's, you know, ancestral in terms of culture or ancestral in terms of history. So, you know, like I was brought up Jewish, so there's a whole strong ancestral cultural thing.
Cultural lineage.
Yeah, so I'm like I'm third generation, second or third generation English. You know, my grandparents, you know, came over on a boat, you know, from Poland or Russia, or you know, so I have that as an ancestral memory in my body. Yeah.
And we all have those memories, even we think no, but it's of course they are.
Yeah. So the thing is, if you numb your sensitivity, how are you going to hear it? Yeah. So it has to push harder. It'll push you into the darker aspects, you know, the more suffering in your life, you know, at some point. And then we say, oh, the world's a terrible place. Why is it doing that? But in some ways, it's trying also at the same time to help, you know. And when we don't have an elder, we have less of an elder community, there's nobody to say, well, actually, do you know what, that's fairly okay, you know, that's normal, it's all right, you know, here's a few pointers, or, you know, we throw the chicken bones on the floor, and we, you know, all these old technologies. So
that's why I think that the theme of this year and all this ancestral connection that I always want to bring is so important for human beings, or in these times that we're so disconnected and so lost of our identity. We just don't know, like we are trying to go everywhere and we don't know who we really are. And what you're mentioning is about those memories and reconnecting to that story that is so unique about you, or each of us. It tells a lot, and we learn a lot of who we really are. You know, it's like, okay, let me. It's not that I'm gonna, you know, go back and I don't know, need to live there or follow any traditions or anything. Of course, if you can do it if you want, but it's at least to understand who we are and why. Maybe answer some questions ourselves.
So if we talk about this ancestral energy, it's just what comes to my mind right now. It's a bit of a jump in the story, but I think it really gives a good example, which is, so I became a monk. I trained for a monk. I was a monk for a long time, 15 years, and 10 years I lived in a monastery in England. And during that time, I was invited by the Jewish community to give a talk. So I went back and I gave a very public talk at a festival. It's called Limud. It's very well known in the Jewish community in England. And somebody asked me after that, would I run a retreat for the Jewish community, a meditation retreat, mindfulness retreat, because I had this background. So it's called Jew Booze, or Boo Jews, Jewish Buddhist, Buddhist Jewish. And so I offered to run that retreat, and they said we'll find a place for it, you know. So they said okay, and then they told me this part in London where it was going to be held. And I said to my mum, you know, I said, oh, I've been invited to run this retreat, Jewish retreat. There's quite a lot of people coming. It's in this part of London, and her face went white. Like she said that's where I was born. So I work, and I still currently do that. Actually, I work with the three generations of where my family come. Sorry, two generations. Yeah, so the sons of the of like my mother's age, I work with them. Now, I've had completely different experience. Yeah, I was never planning to go there. I never planned to run a retreat there. That was not on my, you know, I wanted to offer something back to my lineage in a way. But so how does that work? You know, say literally on the same road. Quite extraordinary.
Wow. That's an amazing experience, definitely. And I'm curious, like, okay, growing up in England and coming from a Jewish family, how you became a Buddhist monk? Like what? How
So,
come?
at some point, this intensity of suffering, I couldn't access it through the Jewish tradition, and so I gave it up because I couldn't work out how to use it, and nobody could explain it to me about how to use it. So I quit, and then I just went on a journey of more suffering. Really, just kept, and I thought that there must be happiness and truth and goodness in this world somewhere. So I started another way. So basically I started this journey, and it took me on lots of different patterns. It took me through work, through the business world at a young age as a technical support manager. And then it took me to get in a degree in AI. Then I went traveling around the world. And then that traveling around the world, I was in Australia, and I thought I'll do a meditation course. And I thought I'd be doing that in India, right? But I needed some money when I was in Australia, and I found this job, and it was for a drug rehabilitation center in Perth in Australia. And I used to sneak back in the evening and sleep on the floor because I wanted to save money. And somebody caught me and said, "Don't do that. Come and stay at my house." So I went back to this guy's house, and in his room he had a very thin book about meditation. And I said, "When I go to India, I'm going to do that." He says, "Oh, you don't need to do that. This is what we do to help the mothers get off drugs, and you can join as well, and I will organize that." So he did, and I joined this 10-day, very intense, from 4:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, sitting most of the day, no eating after midday, and very strict, no writing, reading, listening to radio, nothing. And I was sitting there in the hall, and maybe there was 50 or 60 people, and they kept coming up to me and saying, "You're smiling and you're happy. Normally people suffer here, and you seem to be loving it." And I said, "I found what I'm looking for." And from that point onwards, I started leading a very ethical life. I followed the 5 Buddhist precepts. I thought I was going to Thailand to have fun and all of that, but it finished. That never materialized. And I had this very strong internal it's a calling. I mean, in that same ancestral calling.
It is a calling.
Yeah, calling to become a monk. And basically, it didn't stop. So I traveled for a lot longer. I traveled around the world for a long time, maybe 4 years. But the urge to become a monk didn't stop. And when I got back to England, I entered a Buddhist monastery there.
In England.
Yeah. And I didn't leave for 10 years. So I stayed there. No, it wasn't a closed order, but we did have a very strict lifestyle: no sex, no money, no drugs, no rock and roll. And I lived as a beggar. I wore a brown robe, a saffron Thai forest tradition. And then after that 10 years, I traveled around the world with my own brand for 5 years, and I ended up back in Australia at the other end of the road to where I had learned to meditate. And that is where I also disrobed, where I stopped becoming a monk. So
really?
Yeah. Kind of.
That's like a complete cycle.
And it wasn't planned. Like, it wasn't planned like that. And interestingly, like, I was a forest monk. So when I see a picture of a tree, that always reminds me of the basic rules. One of the basic rules of a monk was that a tree was your shelter. That's all that was required, nothing else. So if you had a tree, your urine was your medicine, right? So these are very, like, so you go out begging, your robes can be made from the rags of a dead body. So it means you can have it's not the way that I lived, but it means you can have the most simplest life because you're a sort of renunciant. So that also brought me back into another set of ancestors. And I lived in a mixed community as well. So I lived with monks and nuns. So and then when I went to Australia, I went to Perth, and there the ancestral power is incredibly strong, right? The Aboriginal culture there
Yes.
is so
Wow.
it's very hard to explain it. But one of the ways I thought about explaining it was that it's like a thin Western culture is a very thin veneer on top of a huge ginormous culture. So and if you just do that a little bit, it comes to the surface. So they have all these beautiful rites and rituals, and so I used to run these. So in Perth I ran these forest creative weekends where we would get in contact with that wisdom by honoring by honoring the Aboriginals and the land. And it's got like in Australia, it's called welcoming the country. You know, it's where you welcome the elders and you respect that. But that is a very tangible experience. It can easily sound woo woo, but you know, like a bit magical. But when you're in that nature and with that land, it becomes a very real experience. Lived experience. So I feel kind of really privileged to have lived a life like that on the gift of others and on the gift of ancestors, because it is through that lineage that, you know, I was enabled to be a monk in that way.
So then everything ends up again like, okay, I'm not going to be a monk anymore in Australia. And then what? Like suddenly suddenly you become a leadership coach, and then you have your approach as a playful monk, that the way you call it, playful monk. And how all this was born after that.
So what happened was that people asked me in Australia to start working with them one-to-one, and because of my monk's rules, it's difficult to be alone with people, you know, that especially women. So what we did was we used to do walk and talks along the beach in public, and I you know, so I started to do this sort of walking coaching in nature, and it worked really well. And people really liked it, and then then people invited me into their companies, and I worked in a lot of different organizations in Australia. I was invited into a hospital for a week. I lived, as it was called, the PlayfulMonk in residence, and I lived there. And I used that when I was a monk. But then when I disrobed, I thought, look at my age, my experience. I've worked with really poor people. I've been around extremely rich people. So that didn't faze me. And I'd been a leader for so long, and I'd already started to supervise other religious leaders. I'd worked in the interfaith movement, and people asked me why the events that I ran were so successful and how could I help them. And I also started to mentor rabbis as well.
How interesting.
In the contemplative roots of that tradition. And so I felt confident enough to work with leaders and executives, and that's what I did. And it is, you know, I made a lot of mistakes, you know, and I started off in England. Now I live in the Netherlands, and I came here for love. I fell in love with a beautiful Dutch lady. And I started working with companies here, and you know, and so it's been a really amazing journey, you know. And in the beginning, I thought to myself, you know, like, gosh, you know, what do I know about the business world? You know, like I haven't. What, you know, what would I know? You know, but then I started to see, oh my gosh, it's all the same dynamics.
It's all the same.
It's the same dynamics. It's about relationships. It's about being able to express yourself, communicate, you know, to know yourself. You know, the number one rule of leadership is know thyself. You know, if you don't know yourself, you know, how can you help others? And then if you want to work collectively, what do you need to let go of? You know, because you'll be holding on to something, you know, the belief that I've got to do it, or, you know, the group can't do it. So, you know, and I just started working more and more in this way. And I tend to sort of work with really creative, fast thinking executives, because they've got nobody to speak to and nobody to meet them, you know, and I find that that's very easy for me. You know, I've had a pretty complex life. You know, I've dealt with lots of complex situations. When I was a monk, I ran these family camps. So they were large things, and I learned how to work with large groups of people, 100 people, and train facilitators. I went from there to working with teenagers, and then from teenagers I ran adult creative retreats, and then I started running silent retreats, which were interpersonal and combined personal development with also understanding who you are. And in a way, this ancestral roots is an enabler to take you back to who you really, really are, right? And that place is the place of absolute freedom, right? Of complete knowing. And in our day and age right now, with the complexities that we're following, if there's it needs that skill set, right? To work in a rules-based way will not help you deal with complexity. Yeah. To micromanage. Yeah. I learned this on one of the first family camps I did. I tried to micromanage because that would, I sort of learned that style. And I could see it just didn't work. I wanted the kids to have free play. I knew about that research even back then, which I said before about Stuart Kaufman. But I wanted the kids to have free play. But then part of me also wanted to micromanage. And then I realized you can't do that with that group of people. So what do you need? You have to empower everybody as a leader, right? Including the kids, a mature community. So, so I realized all that experience I had is exactly the same thing that happens in business. Like right now, I'm doing a board level transformation. I'm working with 10 very senior executive directors. We're looking about how they can better work as a team. And what do we see? We see the need to please others. What's called the reactive mindset. Which is about it costs you energy and short-term goals, rather than the creative mindset, which is about long-term vision and purpose. And doesn't cost you energy. It comes from because you're living your dream. Right. You're living from your heart, or however you want to express it. I mean, we can say it in different ways. So, and that's an inside-out job. That is understanding yourself first inside and letting that manifest outside. And the more that one knows oneself, then the easier it is to to admit one makes a mistake, because failure is where we learn. You wouldn't believe the amount of failures I've made in my life, but I see them as learning opportunities. And we talk about this agile way of working. When I first heard this, I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And then I went and did a course. I became a Scrum Master. Just for the fun of it. Because and then I got in there, and I was the oldest person in the room, right? And then I thought, I'm doing this for years. I know there's a format to it, and that's fine. But actually, the basic thing of iterative, and incremental, and it's all about people first. Well, if you work with teenagers, that's what you have to do. If you want it to be really effective. So all of this knowledge, and also trainings, I also had to train myself. I've learned I had to learn a lot about trauma, about how you work with trauma in groups and individually, because it comes up.
It always comes up.
It always comes up. So I'm not a therapist, but you need to know when that comes up, and whether and how to refer or say there's a problem here. So I did all of this, and breath work, and I work with birth. I actually worked a lot with birth and pregnant mothers.
Oh wow!
As well, because I needed to understand why is it, what is that deeper pattern? Anyway, I could go on, but you get the idea.
I'm getting the idea. I love it, because as I told you, I work in human resources, and I've been working with leaders of my life, and I know how pragmatic they can be, and how lonely as well, because it's like these high level positions can be very lonely, and sometimes they just don't know what to do, it's difficult for them to trust something as well. The pressure is too much, from everywhere. So I find it very interesting, because it's like, if you come from a place that is like very different from corporate, but of course the experience you went through is the same, but in a different context. So
Yes.
if you bring the fresh eyes into this world of organizational world, because it's already full of, you know, things that sometimes we end up being blind and we don't see anymore because we're just all full of that. Right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. And so like the playful monk approach is like the play part, which is the best place to learn. We learn when we play. We, you know, if I was just to say to you, you know, give you a load of facts, you'd probably forget them. But if I embed that in play, you'll remember them. You'll remember it as an embodied activity. Yeah. And then monk is you know, that I don't see that as a gender thing. I mean, I understand, you know, there's nuns, but monk is the either the growth mindset or the mindset really of freedom. So when you bring those two together, you get, it's really powerful. And people ask me, you know, like, so what does that really mean? And I just came up with a framework. So the first one is co-explore, which is what we've really been doing together now. We've had a relational experience. We've been exploring together. Yeah. The second one is to make it sort of playful, with joy and that. And then when you bring explore and play together, you get you need love, right? Because it gets tricky. The mind relaxes. Things come to the surface, and you need this level of kindness to yourself first. Once you get access to love, of course, it's about abundance. It's about sharing it. But in the beginning, you also need it for yourself. And then explore, play, love in a way helps you recognize presence. And presence is your ability to be with any situation as it is, right? It's the center of the storm. It's the knowing, you know, and through that presence, I mean, these are not linear. Please, I'm not saying them, but it's just a description. The last one is a connection. And so we need inner connection to have outer connection. That's where you get impact. That's that inside out story. Yeah, the more that we know ourselves, the more outer impact we can have, you know. So we can learn that through doing outer work, you know, or we can most effectively learn it by understanding ourselves. And that deep connection is the one that takes you to peace, because then you start to recognize all these different, for a better word, fields, the family field, the ancestral field, the universal, all these things, because we see the interconnected nature of who we are. I mean, I'm looking at the tree, and I'm remembering all that research and those books that have come out recently about how trees are so interconnected, and they send nutriments to one another and talk to one another. So even science is sort of saying this. And so this interconnectedness, when we take it really to the max, we see no separation. That's where peace is.
Wow.
And that's the end. And that's the end of the story. when you recognize that, you're with all the ancestors. You're with the whole world, and that recognition, that knowing ends suffering, and recognizes the deep peace that we all are beyond the conditioned world, beyond what we think and feel and sense. And if we can rest in that, we can find our life can be easeful. It doesn't mean that life is any more easier, because conditions can be like that, the way that they are. But your ability to be with them, your ability to know your own sense of peace is phenomenal, really. I mean, you know,
And I'm thinking here, even like that peace will avoid so much of that, what's going on, the violence, the wars, the differences, the fear that is from the other one that is different from me, and I don't know. And so I always see that other one as a threat.
Yes.
Right. But if I'm in peace with myself, that's it. I don't need that.
Exactly. And that's why I wanted to start with my two grandmothers, because it's that polarity which allows for both. They're both be allowed. They're both be allowed, right?
Yes.
Like one is not better than the other.
There you go.
you know. So if we can embrace this sense of opposites, yeah, it doesn't mean that we have to like all people. Like I have a personality, yeah, that doesn't like a lot of people, right? And I just accept that, right? But it doesn't mean underneath all that there's not compassion or kindness.
Right.
I just have to respect the way that I'm sort of built in that way. I like to be extrovert. I like to be you know, I like my own time as well.
Yeah.
So it's fine. That's the balance. But that all is in the conditioned world. Yeah, that's all with form. But in the recognition in this peace place, we can embrace all variations of that and recognize it, that we are also that as well. You know, and that helps us, or helps me anyway, to be compassionate to all sides of a conflict. Yeah. I'm not. This is not about right and wrong again. That's a separate thing. Right? This is about how do you embrace the situation, and from that place see what the appropriate response is. You know, and as you said, you know, so beautifully, like if you engage with another and can see through that, and they can also meet you in that, yeah, then there's no conflict you can't resolve. None whatsoever. You know, and as we see right now, you know, the world is very complex and conflicted. You know, yeah. I'm just reminded of Professor Ian McGilchrist's work on the left and right hemisphere, and I think that's another lens, it's another way of exploring this, which is to say that when we're very left hemisphere dominated, which means we have a very focused attention, that's all that we see, and if we're more right brain, yeah, we see a wider view. I mean, that's a very simplistic, and you can listen to him speak in much more depth. But when we are left brain to left brain, we are only doing language and right and wrong. When we're doing something holistic, which is what your grandmother would hold, because that's the nature of, you know, the nature of the feminine, as I understand it, is circles and holistic. Then you get a very different feeling. Like I want to hold. Look, my hands want to go wide. They want to embrace.
It's true. Yeah, the feminine is all about embracing, but we all need to play with those polarities, you know, masculine, feminine, our left side and our right side, and it's all about that, because that's why we have both of them. So use them and not go to the extremes, because then something is missing.
That's right. And leadership effectiveness is about being able to hold these opposites. Actually, that is statistics. The research says, you know, if you can hold these opposites, yeah, then your ROI, your outcome in the business will be so much more higher. Yeah, your energy levels will be so much more higher. And then as you move through that, the shift that can take place is also into more of a global steward in terms of our planet and our society. Yeah, and you know that shift is possible by the willingness to explore yourself. It's available to anybody.
It is true, and that's what we also need to do. I remember in our previous conversation that it seemed that it was so long, but it was so short. But that we were talking, like you were mentioning that you work with men. You know, you're helping men through their journeys and their paths. And I was mentioning also, and we were talking that it's being done so much for women right now, and of course we know the reasons for that, and historical reasons. But we are going the opposite. Like everything is now about women and women and women, and we forgot about the men. So is that like, okay, we need to integrate both, because if not, things are not going to change again.
Exactly. You know, like when I ran a family camp, or you know, even with this board level transformation I'm doing now, I'm working with another woman coach, and it was for this very reason, like to have the balance in the room. And you know, what I'd also say is that it's really important in terms of like male development to see what the possibilities are, because it leads to such a rich life. I found by contacting and knowing oneself, knowing one's emotions, and that also by having those examples, like of eldership, within society, it allows for also for young people to break out of that mold, and to see that it's possible. You don't have to be a tough man. I can hold my ground just as good as anybody else. Yeah. You come and push me, I'll hold my, I'll hold my ground and I'll work with you. Yeah. I can do that. Yeah. And I can also do the opposite. I can be fluid, and we need both. We need the, the boundaries. So it, I guess I'm filtering myself a little bit here. I hear in my head, because it's so difficult. I don't want to say to men, go and do this, because I know that doesn't work. So what I'm trying to say is this is just an encouragement to explore the possibilities, and particularly within companies, because if you look at the boardroom, I've been very fortunate in the company I work with in the UK as head of faculty. I get to meet really extraordinary coaches, and we've done a lot around also with female bosses, and so this whole period when women reach 40, and the struggles that come with that. If that is not enabled by a man, because mostly the culture is male dominated, and there's no empathy there, then women leave the workforce. That's the statistics. I mean, you can read about it online. So my thought is, how do you also enable men to get an appreciation, getting an understanding? And that, for me, that understanding comes through knowing yourself. Knowing your male body. Not, you can't, as I said, we can't know a female body, but can know your own male body and how to relate to that.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So we've been already talking like 52 minutes.
Okay.
We can go on and on.
No, it's lovely.
So I will love to wrap up with a question that comes with the theme, and knowing that, this boy that was born in England and through a Jewish family and became a monk, and all these 10 years helping others and learning so much, and suddenly decides not to be more a monk, and now helping leaders, and with your amazing PlayfulMonk Way, that your new approach, and not new, but your approach that you have brought from all this experience. So the question is, what did you do once you knew? And of course, you have told a lot about it, but is that, I want just some words from you. Is that legacy that you're leaving? Is that knowing that you have through all this experience, that's the reason why you're doing what you're doing? So just like something that you want to bring around that.
There's two words. One is trust, to learn to really trust yourself. And the other one is peace. Like to really recognize in your own beingness a peace.
Amazing.
And that's open to anybody that wants to take and look for themselves and see who they are. It's truly available, and it's not distant. It's actually incredibly simple, and it's a recognition of who you are, and that comes by saying, people often ask me, what did you learn as a monk? What was that big thing? Yeah. And I would say, I just learned one thing, and that was to say yes.
Wow.
Say yes to everything. That also means a no. Yeah, I'm saying no to that because I'm saying yes to this. Right.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So it's this deep willingness to accept the way things are.
Got it. And accept the way you are and what you want, right? Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And respect yourself first.
Exactly. Respect yourself. Respect yourself. And if you like, the wisdom of the elders, the wisdom of the the ancestors can come through you, and then that can move through you, and you can also see there is peace.
It's true. Oh, this has been so amazing. I
Oh,
love it.
thank
I can
you.
stay here forever and like just talking and laughing. So much fun. And I want to share your website if Turi can help
Yeah.
us, because anybody wants
Yeah,
to
yeah,
reach
sure.
out and know more about the
Yeah,
Playful
thank you.
Monk
Yeah.
approach and about
Yeah.
AMA.
Yeah. So
Yes, please reach
you can
out.
find me on playfulmonk.net, and I post regularly on LinkedIn as well under Amaranatho, so you can find me through the website through LinkedIn.
Yes, yeah. So
Lovely.
please reach out, because I'm
Yeah.
sure you're doing amazing things and you can help us all through
Yeah.
our struggle. So thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much. Really,
It's
thank
been
you,
such a
Monica. It's been a
pleasure.
pleasure, really. It
Me
has been.
too. And I hope this is not the, because this is the second, but I hope this is the one of many more that we're going to be connected and
Lovely.
doing fun stuff. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you,
You take
Monica.
care. Have a
Yeah,
great
thanks.
rest of your day or
And
evening for
you.
you.
Yeah, evening.
Okay. Okay. And thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody, for joining us. Looking for more next time.